Hi guys, and welcome to today's SEMrush webinar, and it's the 15th episode of the SEMrush Toolbox. And today I'm going to be talking about the brand monitoring tool, and I'm going to be joined by an old SEMrush favourite, Mr. Steptoe & Son, Jason Barnard. Jason, how are you?
I'm fine, doing very well. Thank you, Craig. Thank you for having me on.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. I always remember back to your first webinar I think I hosted. So you've come a long way since then. It's been a bit of a journey for you.
Yeah, it was about a year and a half ago, and you were my very first host, and you were very welcoming, and I was incredibly happy.
And then you became a host yourself very, very quickly.
Yes.
So yeah, you must be doing something right. But for anyone who hasn't ever seen you before, Jason, do you want to give the audience just a bit about yourself, what you're currently doing, and stuff like that?
Well, I'll give you a very short life history. I did an economics degree, which means that I know about economics. I did statistics in that, so I know about numbers. Moved to France, started to play the double bass, played music for 10 years. So I was a professional musician for a while. Then I was a blue dog in a cartoon, doing the voiceover for another 10 years, and then moved from there into SEO, digital marketing about 12 years ago. But the cartoon site was the segue into digital marketing because we had 1 million visits a month from Google because we did really good SEO on Google. So that was from 98 to 2008. So I did 10 years of SEO purely on Google and then moved over to become a consultant. Now I'm a speaker, consultant, and podcast host.
The podcast. So I've also appeared on that, but I've seen... I think we've obviously met several times in the last couple of months, and it's always normally over a beer at a speaking event or whatever it's going to be. But did I hear correctly that you're going to do it? You're aiming for 100 podcasts this year, or was that me just making that up?
No, you're not making it up. I was aiming at 100 when I started. I've got to 56, I think I released now. I've got another 20, waiting to be released. So I'm at 76. So by the end of the year, I'll probably be about 120, maybe 140.
Good effort. And as a problem, like a podcast, something I'm going to be doing in the near future. I'm probably not going to do it in the same style as yourself. I want to do something slightly different than the interview formats. I don't want to do the same old thing, that everyone else is doing. But, how is the podcast working for you? Is it attracting a decent audience? Is it good feedback? What's the...
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on the same old thing that everybody else is doing. I'm doing not the same old thing that everyone else is doing. I'm doing something a little bit different, I hope, in that it's informative and fun, and I try and have a really nice conversation with people. So I set a subject, a topic, we start talking about it, and often it kind of... It varies a little bit, moves around, and we end up talking about sometimes some very unexpected things, but it always comes out with something really interesting. The people I'm talking to are incredibly passionate about what they're doing, and I'm incredibly interested in what they've got to say, what they've got to share with me. And it's about 20 minutes long, and I think that's about right for a really good conversation. And I hope that when you listen to the podcast, it's like listening to a conversation between two incredibly passionate people.
Yeah, I think that type of different angles, I'm not sure what angle I want to go in for. I listened to some podcasts. I've obviously appeared on yours, which was more of a general chit chat than a, crazy structured interview, if you like. We had a bit of a laugh on there and stuff. So,
but if I may interrupt, it was a chit chat where I came away with lots of things that I learned about social media and automating social media work. So kind of it's a chit chat with loads of information. Yeah. I mean, you were great.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously that's the thing for doing these is to give people actionable tips and advice at the same time as having, a beer and a bit of a chit chat as well. So yeah, I think you're doing well. And from the ones I've listened to, I've listened to a fair few of them. The ones that people keep tagging me in them and mentioning me in them. I think I keep getting slagged for the Scottish accent, but but yeah, any fame's good. But no, they're doing well, and I think you've done really well to get that amount of stuff released. So long may it continue. So for anyone who wants to listen to Jason's podcast, it's on your website anyway, Calicube.
Spellingcube.pro, yeah, and I've got a couple of slides that I'm going to show later on, so you can write down the URL, so you'll be able to find it.
Yeah.
And there's loads of great people like Rand Fishkin to listen to, and Joost de Valk and Jonah Alderson and yourself. And tomorrow I'm going to be interviewing John Mueller from Google.
Interesting. So yeah, no, you've got a good range of different people on here doing different stuff. So yeah, definitely worth a listen. But anyway, before we bore everyone to tears with podcast talk, while we're supposed to be talking about the brand mention tool, what I'll do is just get started with the introduction to the tool. So I'm going to give you a quick 10-minute overview of what the tool does and the functionality of it. Then Jason's going to give us a presentation on the reasons why we would use brand mentions and kind of some of the techniques and strategies that Jason uses, as a result of that. If you've got any questions on the functionality of the tool, we do have the customer success team in the YouTube chat. Make sure that you ask as many questions as you want. They guys know how the tool works, why it provides the data that it does. And I'm sure, if you've got any feedback or whatever, you can also stick that on there and give the guys some feedback on what you may want to see on the tool as well. So without going any further, I'm going to start sharing my screen. And we will start showing you where to, first of all, find the tool. So where I find the tool is you set up a project. So projects, and I go to my own website, which I've put in there. So obviously the project allows you to, set up the site audit and various other different tools here. You'll see in the middle, we've got the brand monitoring tool there. And so if I just click on brand monitoring, it will ask you for your URL and some keywords and stuff like that based on what mentions you want to be found for. So I'll just show you quickly what that looks like. So you can stick in 3 main keywords. So whatever they may be, like your name or your business name or whatever it may be, you can put them in there. You can also add in another 5 other keywords like SEO tool, marketing, or whatever you feel is important to your business. You can also exclude specific keywords such as jobs or whatever, mentions that you don't really want to follow up on, jobs and stuff like that would possibly be one of them. And you can obviously configure country or language here as well, and you can obviously tick or untick whether you want a weekly report at whatever time, and you can start tracking everything. So that's how you would set up a campaign. But prior to coming on here, I just put in a small bit of data based on my own website just for demonstration purposes. So I'll just show you everything about the tool. So this is the overview tab. So when you put the data that I previously showed you into the screen, based on different keywords and stuff, it's going to show you this nice dashboard here. So I've only put in a couple of keywords there based on the SEMrush Summer Jam that I was in Portugal last week. And there's 24 mentions. So it's giving me the total mentions here, positive mentions with the highest traffic and a total estimated reach. So that's all nice data there. And you can filter, there's different areas where the data can come from. So it can come from the web, forums, Instagram, and you can use the date filters here as well if you want to check specific dates for mentions as well. So it gives you this kind of overview of information. It will also show you the top domains that mention your particular brand or keyword, and it will show you authority score, domain traffic, and it will also show you if there's backlinks pointing to your project. So my project is craigcampbellseo.com, which is my website. And of the mentions that are set up there, no one actually linked to my website. So you'll see here on the second little part here, there is no backlinks at all. If there was, it would say 2, 3, 4, or 5, or whatever it's going to be. Sadly, people online don't really talk about my website as such. They'll probably say, oh, it was good to see Craig at this event or whatever it's going to be. So there wasn't any backlinks there for me to get. So sadly, that's the way it goes. But that's the overview tab of the brand monitoring tool. The next tab along is the mentions. So this is basically going to allow me to look at the web. So the first tab here is the web, forums, Twitter, or Instagram. I'm just going to stick to web just now so that it shows us the data from the web. There's 24 mentions found. As I say, there is the date filter here. You can filter it down further by using in domains, in titles, in mentions, and everywhere. And you can put specific keywords in here. You can also filter them down with link, not with link, or whatever. I would always leave don't filter on just now. And you can also use the sentiment tab here as well, positive, negative, and neutral. And there are some advanced filters here as well. So you can also filter it down by domain traffic, estimated reach, authority score, link to URL, track domain names, sources, and tags. I'll talk about tags later on, hidden mentions and favorite mentions. So we'll talk about tags and hidden mentions and stuff in a minute. So that's the advanced filters. Now, this is what the mentions look like. So I've got a mention on this particular domain name here. So on Moogle.com. It's got an authority score of 73 out of 100. It's got high traffic. And it shows you the kind of mention and stuff here. And it was just an article. I think it was an interview or something along those lines. And it gives you the estimated reach for that article. And it's saying it's negative. Now, I'm not entirely sure why the tool is saying that's a negative mention of me online, because it's not, it's positive. So you can actually change that if you click on it. And it will help SEMrush's algorithm by making sure that they understand the difference between negative and positive and neutral. Earlier I said about tags, you can add tags in here as well, and you could do brand, you could tag it up as whatever, Craig, websites, mention. So I can add a tag on there. You can add multiple tags if you like, which will then allow you to further filter things down and stuff like that. So if I wanted to change things and use different filters, then I can add tags in there and search by that and stuff like that. So that's basically what the mentions data interface looks like. Now, you can also add this mention to favorites. So you can add that to favorites. You can also hide that mention. So if I wanted to hide that mention out of, you know, what, because this is basically going to be my workflow that's sitting in front of me. I can hide that mention. If I don't want anything to do with that mention, I can hide that as well. I can also hide this one as well. I think it was, I was mentioned on Myloz's website, who interviewed Anton, who's hiding in the background. He does a lot of the stuff for SEMrush webinars. So I can hide that one if I wanted to, or I could add a tag to it or whatever. But it was a positive mention that I got, so I'm going to change that to positive. But for example, if I didn't get a backlink, which I didn't on that particular article, so you'll see here it quite clearly says there was no backlink, I may decide to send that to the link building tool. So I'm going to tick this box. So just tick that box there, send to link building tool, and I can send that mention to my link building tool, which would then allow me to reach out to Myloz saying, hey, you mentioned me here, but you didn't link to my website. You know, how about it? And that's just one of the reasons that you may want to monitor your mentions, but I'll let Jason talk about that shortly. So we're talking about the functionality of the tool here, and you can basically scroll down and see all the different mentions you've got on various different websites. Now, you can also export this data. So other than sending it to the link building tool, you can export that to a CSV or a XLS spreadsheet, and you can, you know, send that off to a customer, send it off to someone to, you know, have a look at, or whatever your process may be. So that is what the mentions interface looks like. Statistics, it will show you mention volume trend, and you can compare campaigns, you know, different campaigns within your SEMrush. You can I've just put SEMrush in here for an example, but I could basically compare my website with SEMrush's, and you see that SEMrush's mentions clearly get a hell of a lot more than I do, which is fair to say, you know, with the size of the company and whatnot. So I can compare data with other people. You can do that with your competition and stuff like that. So you can have a look at that. You can export this as a PNG as well, if you wanted to show someone that nice graph there as well. So you can do that if you wish to. And you can go down further and you can see the top domain names again. So we'll just scroll down. You can see the different domain names there that had mentioned me. So we've got SEO Trade News, Omicido, Mylaws, Ravens Tools, Search Engine Watch, and a few other bits and bobs there that have mentioned me in one way or another. And so that's what statistics does. You can basically scroll through there. You can look and see if there was any kind of backlinks or whatever. There's no data there for that just now, but it's all mentions. So it's going to show you the kind of statistics for mentions. Resources is the next tab. Now, you can also track other resources for mentions of your brand name or whatever it may be. So you can manually go in and track resource. So you can enter up to 10 other resources. So if you wanted to track the BBC, for example, you could put that in there, add that into your project, and that will obviously track the BBC for any mentions of your business. So if you know of a resource where you're regularly mentioned, then you can put that into the resources there, and you'll be able to get notified when you're mentioned on any of those resources, and obviously then reach out and do whatever you're going to do to take advantage of that mention. Now, the next tab along is the About tool. So you've obviously got me showing you briefly how the tool works, but there is a whole load of information on here about the tool and what estimated reach means, what sentiment means, what tags mean, favorite and hidden, domain traffic, track domain, block domain. So, for example, if you wanted to block a domain from appearing in your mentions, you may want to hide mentions that, you know, come from a spammy source or your own domain name or whatever, just so that you can filter your stuff out. It just allows you to monitor your web reputation online without any kind of clutter. So I think that's quite important that they do have all of these features on here. And that is pretty much what the tool does. I think, you know, the tool is fairly basic, simple and easy to use. You can add other campaigns. You can go to the top right-hand side and edit your campaign if you wanted to change some of the keywords or whatever it may be. You can go in there and edit all that stuff. And if you go to email reports, you can go in there and change the email address that the report goes to, whether it's done daily, weekly, or monthly, on specific days and specific times. So that may be something that you want to report to your client on in terms of mentions, and, you know, just to keep yourself looking busy or whatever. I think the email and reports is quite an important thing, but also just to notify yourself that you have get mentions. It's quite easy to forget some of these things. So it's, you know, you maybe set that up to come to you first thing on a Monday morning, and it may be the very first thing that you do of a week is then start to check out your brand mentions for the last week or whatever it may be. So great tool. And as I say, Jason is going to come on screen now, and he's going to give us more information in terms of what he uses the tool for, why you may want to monitor your brand mentions and everything else. I've tried not to go too in-depth in anything like that, Jason, to allow you to tell us what you do, because I think that's what we're all waiting for. So the stage is yours.
Brilliant. I mean, what I really loved about that is very clear explanation, and it really pushes home how important it is to organize it with using your favorites, using your tags, filtering, and excluding things you don't want, and making sure you're including things that you do want, because SEMrush is a phenomenally good tool, but it can't crawl the whole web. It hasn't got the power that Google's got. So if you're giving it clues where you might be appearing, it will really help SEMrush to help you.
Exactly.
So basically, the way you've explained it is saying, yeah, use it to organize your own work and also help SEMrush to help you. Now, I'm going to look at why you might want to do it, why you might be interested in your brand mentions, and what you can do with this tool to actually improve your overall in linking and mentions on Google, especially with EAT, which I will explain in a moment. Now I'm about to share my screen. I got a bit confused. There we go, we're right, yep. Can everyone see it? Craig, can you see that?
Yep, all good to go.
Right, we're looking at the brand monitoring tool. I'm Jason Barnard. If you want to connect with me online, go for one of those three sites. A very quick mention for the podcast we talked earlier on, the most fun you'll ever have learning about digital marketing from the experts. That's the link I was talking to earlier on. And here are some of the guests. And you can see Craig down there in the bottom in the middle. You'll probably recognize some of the people. I mentioned them as well. They're really, really intelligent people who have shared some amazing stuff. I recommend the podcast, not because it's mine, but because these people are amazing. So here's what we're going to look at very quickly. 7 points. I've grayed out the ones because obviously everybody wants to know what we should do, but we need to set the scene with traditional SEO, what Google is looking for today, PR, which could mean several things, brand reputation, EAT, links are not alone anymore, and what you should do. So traditionally, this is really interesting from looking at it from today's point of view. All Google ever did was count words, count links, and try and estimate link value. And that's where we're all coming from. We're saying, oh, we want follow links. We want these links that have the follow attributes so that we get all this super juice and that Google sees these links to be incredibly valuable and increases our page rank. We need these sites to have high domain authority, which is a measurement of how powerful a domain is. But is that so intelligent anymore? Page rank, we all know what it is. Or if you don't, it's the measurement of the popularity of a page. Simply put, it's technically a bit more complicated than that, but I won't go into details. But that's so 1998. It was invented in 1998, 21 years ago. PR is still the cornerstone, but which PR? And this is where I find it gets very interesting. PR in 1998 is not the same thing as PR in 2019. PR in 1998 in SEO was page rank, but today it's public and press relations. So the scenario we have, and this is a global overview of what Google is trying to do. It's trying to analyze the question of a user to be able to give them an answer. In order to be able to give them the best answer to the question they have asked, or the best solution to the problem they are expressing, it has three questions. Have I understood what the answer is or what the solution is, i.e. what's on your site, that your content, has it understood what it is you're offering? Is what you're offering a viable solution for the question the person has asked? And is it the most credible? That last one is incredibly important. We have understanding, deliverability, i.e. has it understood? Can it deliver the content? But most importantly, is it credible? Are you the most credible content? Before coming back, we're looking at page rank. Today, we're looking at brand reputation. Page rank still counts, links still count, but we're looking at brand reputation. We're looking at a concept which is less based on links and much more based on mentions. Brand reputation is credibility, and credibility is EAT. If you don't know what EAT is, I'll explain. Expertise, authority, and trust. Marie Haynes talks a lot about this. Google talk a lot about it in their guidelines. They want to send people to sites and answers that are expert, authoritative, and trustworthy. And what they want to analyze that is, you can say, oh, I'm an expert, for example, in double bass playing. That doesn't mean to say I can necessarily play the double bass. I have to prove it. I have to have that information corroborated. I have to have proof. I have to have people say, yes, he can play the double bass. Not only can he play the double bass, but he can play it incredibly well. That would make me both an expert, an authority, and a trustworthy source. So how does Google evaluate expertise, authority, and trust? It finds and evaluates links. That's not changed since 1998. Craig's a big fan of links, I know that. They are still phenomenally important, but now it also finds and evaluates mentions, and that's where the brand monitoring tool comes in. You need to find and evaluate the mentions so that you understand what Google is seeing about you, what it is perceiving your EAT to be. And in this case, context is king. We used to say we need links from high domain authority sites, from powerful sites. Doesn't matter who they are. If I'm a double base player, I can get a link from a restaurant site. It doesn't matter. Today it does. A restaurant site linking to me as a double base player does not have context. It doesn't bring the expertise and the authority. Might bring a little bit of trust, but it doesn't indicate that I'm an expert and authority in double base playing. So we're looking at today, in 2019, 21 years after we were just looking at links for PageRank. 21 years later, we're looking at links, mentions, and the context of both the links and the mentions. If you want to build links, there are already 3 SEMrush Toolbox videos out there, which I haven't watched, but I found them online earlier on. You've got the link building tool, the backlink audit tool, and the backlink gap tool. I won't say anything about those. If you're interested in link building specifically, go and see those. And we're going to look at some link building within this particular tool, within the brand monitoring tool, because there are lots of opportunities to be had. So here we have a situation where the brand monitoring tool from SEMrush finds and evaluates those mentions. The other tools, the backlink tool from SEMrush, finds and evaluates links. This one finds and evaluates mentions. And here I've done an example from all of the examples I've given here. These are not my clients. I've used Sendinblue, Mailjet, and MailChimp, who are all in the emailing industry. They're not my clients. I just use them as examples, put them into the tool to have a quick look. Now, SEMrush has found, in this case, 179 mentions, 18 with backlinks. Craig's didn't have any backlink early on. I have found in general that there are always some backlinks in here. There aren't always very many backlinks. The positive mentions, it's done pretty well, 54. That Craig was talking about the fact that some of the mentions were being shown as being negative when in fact they were positive. That's because the tool is quite new and it's using machine learning to understand what positive and negative sentiment is within your industry. And that's very important because positive and negative sentiment is not the same across every industry. So the more you can correct it, like Craig did earlier on, the better SEMrush will get at evaluating the positive or negative nature of those mentions. So you will find over time that although it gets it wrong a little bit at the start, it will get it better and better for you and for people within your industry very quickly. I've put the little Google logo down at the bottom because if you look at that, you say, okay, SEMrush, big company, they're doing a pretty good job here. They found a lot of mentions. I mean, in my experience is they find quite a lot of mentions. Google is a billion times bigger. They've got so many more pages in their index. They can analyze so much more stuff. If SEMrush can find this stuff, if SEMrush can analyze its quality, if SEMrush can see if there's a backlink or if it's a mention of your brand, and it can estimate the traffic and it can estimate how important and how valuable this mention is, Google can certainly do it and can certainly do it much, much, much better. So don't imagine for a second that Google isn't doing this. Don't imagine for a second that only links matter. Mentions do matter, both in terms of what we would call linkless links. A mention is a linkless link. It's a mention, it brings value to your brand, it brings value to your SEO, it brings value to your SEO through the EAT, expertise, authority, and trust. And that's what you want to build today. Now, quick reminder that in August last year and June this year, there were updates. And generally speaking, we are led to understood that it's based on EAT. Expertise, authority, and trust have become the cornerstone that replaces links. And links, of course, are part of EAT. They're part of the trust. So you can build on top of your links. You don't forget about the links. You don't think links aren't important. They are still incredibly important, but they are not alone anymore. You now need mentions too, and positive mentions. My experience has been about 10% of mentions end up have these links, which gives you a good idea of how much you're missing out on. If you're concentrating on links, you're missing 90% of people who are actually talking about you. And what's Google interested in? It's not interested in physical links. It's interested in who's talking about you. And are they talking about you in a positive manner? Are they content? Are they happy with what you're doing? Are they enthusiastic? Are they saying you're an expert? Are they saying you're an authority? Do they trust you? Google's looking for that information. And if you're not looking at mentions, you're missing 90% of the game. And it's an opportunity. Craig was saying it earlier on. Brilliant stuff. We have on the top the mentions, and on the bottom the links. And you can see that the mentions are much, much, much more volatile, or much more, that we get loads more mentions than we are links. So what we can then do is go in, and as Craig demonstrated, I've isolated here the top 7 best email marketing software solutions 2019. That's obviously very powerful for MailChimp. MailChimp are an email marketing solution. This is within context. It's very popular. We're talking about best. We have a positive sentiment. SEMrush got it right in this case. It's also got an authority score that's helpful and interesting, not necessarily the most important thing we're looking at, but we can go in and we can say, can we have a link, please? So mentions are incredibly important. A mention with a link is even better than just a mention. So if you can get a link and push that 10% or less than 10% up to 20% or 30%, you're really going to be winning the game, because links remain more powerful than mentions, especially links within a positive context. So mention within a positive context is powerful. Link within a positive context with the mention, the link preferably on the brand name, which is something you don't want to look for specific anchor text. You want to look for brand links when they're talking about your brand in general. And the other great advantage here is that you can ask for page level links. Gary Elias is incredibly enthusiastic about pushing across the idea that links, inbound links, don't operate at domain level, they operate at page level. So if I'm looking at this, I can say, well, actually, I could get a link into a specific page that I want to push, as long as it's relevant. What I need to do is ask the person who's written this article if they can add the link. And if I can put myself in their position and see what adding a link to my site can bring to them, I've got much more chance of getting that link. So don't just go in and say, hey, you've mentioned me, give me a link. You say, hey, I've seen you mention me. Thank you very much. That's really cool. It would be very useful for users to have a link. Or if you put a link to me, I'm going to put you in my press mentions page. That might be seen as exchanging links. It isn't exchanging links. It's saying, look, Google, and this is something I'm very keen on. If you've got a mention somewhere, you can link out to it. Google will find that mention. It will identify that it's your brand. It will say, okay, mention the brand, but I'm not 100% sure. If it then comes back around to your site and there's a link through to that mention, Google says, I'm 100% sure it's that. And the confidence that it has that that mention is about you, that positive mention is about you, will increase the power of that mention. So actually linking out, ironically, is becoming very popular again. In 1998, 2004, when I was working on the Blue Dog cartoon website, we linked out all the time. People linked out. Exchanging links or giving links was terribly popular. And then everyone suddenly said, oh, I won't give any links anymore because I'll lose my page rank. You don't. You link. The nature of a bot is it crawls around the web, going from link to link, traveling around the web. If you give it a dead end, if you don't link out to anything, Google will hate you. You've given it a dead end. It has to go around, turn around and go back again. That's not how a bot works. A bot wants to keep going through. The other thing is, if you look at people linking out, if you link out to somebody to something and say, this proves what I'm saying, i.e., in this case, I'm one of the best email marketing software solutions 2019, Google says, okay, I'm starting to believe you. That's credible. That's a credible piece of information that corroborates what it is you're saying. Another example here, we've got a neutral comment. We can actually ask them to change the text. You can actually say to somebody, a journalist, saying, you could get better ranking if your text was more positive. Google likes positive text. And this is Sundance.org, which is obviously a brilliant site. Get in contact with the journalist who wrote this. Start talking to them and seeing if you can get the backlink, but also improve the quality of their writing so that they get an advantage. And if you present it as saying you get an advantage because I'm going to help you with your own SEO, you've got much more chance of getting that backlink. So domain authority, forget it. We want trust, relevancy, and context. We want sites that can be trusted. We want them to be relevant to what we're talking about. We want them to be within the context of what we're talking about. So in the MailChimp example, an email platform, once again, the restaurant, doesn't make much sense. And if you look at trust, very quickly, if you think about domain authority and you say, okay, a gossip site has incredible page rank, it's got loads of domain authority, but is it trustworthy? No. It's not news. They make it all up. It's not a trustworthy source. And Google is now looking at, and they explicitly say they're looking at trust and not the number of links. So gossip sites is an example that Zinyu Nadong, who worked at Google, was using as saying, this is why we cannot trust PageRank as a measure of trust. So PageRank is still there, but trust is becoming increasingly important. That's where we want to look. Trust, relevancy, and context. As you might have noticed, I took a screenshot while Craig was talking and inserted it in my slide deck on the fly. it's a brilliant example of context. Milos is a really nice guy. He's an SEO. He's got an authority score of 19, which is very low, but he's incredibly pertinent. He's very relevant to what Craig is talking about. So this link is a this mention, excuse me, is a very good mention. And also Craig knows Milos. So actually saying to Milos, can you put a link in, is going to be very easy. So Craig can get the link, get the mention, make it positive. You could perhaps ask Milos to rewrite that phrase a little bit, or give him a suggestion on how to rewrite it. And it's contextually very important. It pushes the fact that people within Craig's industry appreciate him, respect him. He has expertise, he has authority, and he is trustworthy because Milos said so. This is another example. It was my initial example for Sendinblue. We've got trust and relevancy from Market Screener because it's got a very high authority score. So we've got trust, we've got relevancy. Trust is measured partially within that. I mean, I wouldn't say there are exceptions, and you have to use your common sense. If this was a gossip site, it wouldn't have trust, even though it had a high authority score. So use a little bit of common sense to judge whether or not this is a useful site, a powerful site for you or not. And the Mojolin one is context because it's talking about how to write the perfect welcome email for your online shop. That's exactly the market that Sendinblue are aiming for, and MailChimp and MailJet. It's got low traffic, it's got low authority score, but it's incredibly good contextually speaking. And the probability of getting a link from Mojolin is much, much higher than getting it from a big site like Market Screener. That's probably a better target to hit, both because it's easier to get and because it's more within context. So brand mentions and user sentiment. We haven't talked about users yet, but if you look at this, we can look at Twitter, forums, and Instagram. Here's my example of SEMrush, excuse me, managed to find all of these links in a minute. It took them a minute to find all 533 mentions of MailChimp. If SEMrush can do it in a minute, Google can probably do it in a second. If we look at this, it does a brilliant job of sorting out the tweets so that you can actually pull them up. And here we don't see MailChimp at all. But when you look and you click through, it's actually a conversation that's been going on between them. So you don't need to go all the way back through the Twitter feed, which takes absolutely ages. You can actually pull them out very quickly with SEMrush from the last thing that was said. And sorry, and as Craig said, you can actually tag this and make sure that you don't keep looking at the same thing over and over again, which is a mistake we see a lot of people doing, is just trying to look through Twitter. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, and you keep coming across the same pieces of hay and you never find that needle. Here's another example in forums, negative forum. This is a good example of somewhere where, I mean, I've had clients who've had this, when the forum thread has developed a little bit, you can actually come in and say that title doesn't make sense anymore because the forum thread has evolved over time. It started off being very negative and it's now become much more positive. Instagram's really interesting because they find this text, but in fact, when you look at it, you don't see the text. So if you weren't using SEMrush, you wouldn't actually see the context of what's going on in this Instagram post. And Craig pointed this, all of this, both boosts your EAT, which is very good for your SEO in general, but it also convinces real people. Because if I see a positive Twitter feed or a positive Instagram feed or a positive forum thread, I'm much more likely to trust you and want to buy from you. And this is what Craig pointed out to me earlier on before we came on air. They're all sales opportunities. Somebody who's saying, is there an alternative to MailChimp? It's a great opportunity for MailChimp to go in there and say, actually, MailChimp's a wonderful opportunity, a wonderful solution anyway. Here are the advantages. Can we perhaps get into contact through email or through telephone so we can talk you through the advantages of working with MailChimp? And a quick bonus is I was looking through this one, and MailChimp, sometimes you come across new ideas that you never would have thought of otherwise. And this is just from sorting through all these mentions. And this is because everybody now puts in MailChimp into their terms of service. And it's negative. What MailChimp could do is communicate with all these people, improve the text around this citation, and give them standardized positive text that can be included in terms of service, standardized, always positive, so that they get not only the mention, but they also get the positive sentiment. And in fact, they could ask for a link, which I only just thought about. Quick warning, there's lots of spam out there. Use the tool, as Craig said. get rid of the stuff that's spammy, ignore it, throw it to one side. This is one site I found which actually looks quite nice, but when you look at About Us, which is one of the things that Google tells their quality guideline people to do, is look at the About Us page and it's empty. So this site, even though it doesn't look too bad, it is bad because they don't say who they are. This will get a very low EAT score and is therefore not worth dealing with. So you spot the spam and the junk and you leave it be. It's very important. Don't worry about it. Google is now sufficiently intelligent to be able to figure out what's spam and junk. If I can do it in 5 minutes, Google can do it in a second. It's the same kind of idea. Google is much more powerful than perhaps we imagine. So you don't need to worry about it. You can just put it to one side in the tool so it doesn't get in your way while you're doing the important work, which is building up the positive stuff rather than worrying about the negative stuff. If the negative stuff is true, do worry about it and do something about it. So what you should do, this is the last bit, and we're into the final stretch. This is the really cool bit where we can say exactly what you should do starting right now. As I said earlier on, you can improve the existing mentions. The idea that journalists or bloggers or people who write websites won't change what they've written is completely false. People are very open to the idea of writing better. They're open to the idea of expressing themselves better. They're open to the idea of putting in backlinks, because if the idea of backlinks is mutual corroboration. It's mutually saying, yes, these two pieces of information are true, and that's very, very important. Anybody who understands anything about SEO today knows that you need to write clearly, simply, with semantic triples, i.e. noun, verb, noun, linking together nouns with verbs as simply as you possibly can. We're writing for, let's say, an 18-year-old, 17, 18-year-old, and we often forget that. We need simple language, relatively few syllables, so that Google and people feel much more, Google can understand it better and people are much more comfortable with it. So get in there and offer it as a manner of helping them out. Make your SEO better, make your writing better, improve your credibility with Google by linking out to the sources of the original information. So there are a lot of ways to argue that, and the important thing is to be empathetic to what the needs of the person you're contacting. Obviously, I've given a very brief overview, but go and read their pages and see what it is that would make them feel good about changing something that will help you. You need to help them for them to help you. So I'm a big fan of linking out. Indicate to Google this is truly talking about me, and I support what it is they're saying. Reach out to people who have written about you, who are mentioning you, and try and get them to add links, improve what they're saying about you, or even write an extra article. You could suggest new articles. You can get new mentions, new links. You can build a relationship, and that brings me to networking. What's really cool today is that instead of just going out there and trying to build links and trying to bully people into giving you links and saying, oh, I've written this great piece, give me a link. It's actually going and talking to people, building relationships. It sounds, I've always found it sounds a bit difficult, not very clear. But in fact, just talking to people, meeting people like Craig, I go around all these conferences, I meet people, and the number of links and mentions I'm getting from that, from talking to real people within my industry, is incredible. It's phenomenal. People talk about me because I'm there. People talk about me because I have a relationship with them. It takes time, but it's well worth it. I would say we're not link building anymore, we're mention building. If you can get positive mentions, you're already a big step up. Links are a bonus, that's 2 steps up, and that's brilliant. But if you can just get the mention, that's already amazing. You're proving to Google that you're expert, authority, and trustworthy, as long as the mentions are from expert, authority, and trustworthy sources. If you can get a link as well, that's more powerful, and that's brilliant. Once again, back to this networking idea, the empathy, the back scratching, talk to people, see how you can help them, build up relationships, and make it real. One thing I did say about a year ago that struck me was, we're all networking constantly on social media. It doesn't have to be physically on social media, and Google sees this. It's watching us network with each other on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. So it sees who I'm networking with. So it can see if somebody's mentioning me and I'm mentioning them, that's a networking going on. So it can see that I have relationships with these people. And if they're in my industry and they're important and they're trustworthy and they're knowledgeable, brilliant for everybody. Bit of back scratching, I'll give you a link, you give me a link. Link swapping, no problem with that. It's buying links or forcing people to give you links that's the problem. So which brands and people should you be targeting? back to that, relevant. We want them to be in context. I don't want a link from a website. I don't want a mention from a website. I want them to be trustworthy. I don't want one from a gossip site. I don't want to be in a gossip site. I want to be in Search Engine Journal, for example, which is or SEMrush. And we want them to be popular, and it's in that order. The first thing you want to get is relevancy. The second thing is trustworthiness, and the third thing is popularity. So if you have to choose, go for relevancy. I took this as well from Craig's live presentation. You can see that Omisido, he's an SEO as well, SEO Trade News, Raven Tools is an SEO tool, all Search Engine Watch. These are all incredibly good for context. Raven Tools and SEO Trade News are probably pretty powerful. Omisido and Milos are not very powerful, but they are very, very relevant, and it's peer support. It's his peers, other SEOs saying Craig Campbell is a great guy. Craig Campbell is knowledgeable. He's an expert and he's an authority, and that has an enormous amount of power. Personal recommendation. Last thing, track and organize, and that's what this tool is for. I've added a +38 and a +12 so we can see that I've done a really good job. I cheated, actually. I just copy pasted them on there, but that's the idea. Is you go back to this, as Craig said, every week you get your email to remind yourself to do it. I love that idea. You get that email and you think, right, Monday morning, I've got to do this. I've got this on my list to do. Get it out of the way on Monday. The next Monday, you'll get the email and it will say +38, +2, +4, and you can see the progress you're making. And using this tool, I have found that if I do it religiously every Monday morning or Tuesday morning, whatever, it never goes down. And you see yourself progressing every week. And as Craig said, you can show that to the boss and the boss is going to love you. So back to Craig. What next, Craig?
Thank you, Jason. Excellent presentation. So what we'll do, guys, if you've got questions that you want to put to Jason or myself, we've got 13 minutes to be able to answer your questions, whether it's about eats or how Jason goes about doing his networking or whatever it may be. It doesn't have to necessarily be related to brand mentions. We can talk about anything you would like, but if there is anything about brand mentions or the strategy, then we're more than happy to answer them as well.
You actually just almost asked me a question, is how do I go about the networking? I was thinking about it the other day, and it's very natural. I'm not doing it because I want all the mentions. I'm doing it because I actually enjoy it. I enjoy talking to people. But what I found is personality. Whatever your personality might be, if you have a personality, people can relate to that. And if you're pretending to be something you're not, you're never going to succeed. If you turn up and you are who you are and you're honest about who you are within your industry, people will see that it's genuine. And that's brilliant. And kind of meeting people of similar, I mean, the people who link to me and the people who mention to me are people I actually get on with. Yeah. And it's as simple as that.
I think that there's a lot to be said for the networking side of things, and I totally agree with what you're saying. It is quite easy to then get mentions and links and kudos from your peers and everything else. It's how the game really works, to be fair. But I think it's all about your personality as well. Everyone goes to events, everyone talks at events, and I think you have to stick out from the crowd. And you do, not as an actor or whatever, doing crazy stuff on stage. I just think in terms of your knowledge, be approachable, be friendly. There's a lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah. I mean, talking about being yourself, I mean, I found myself initially when I started out a year ago, let's say I started a year ago, trying to write like I thought people would want me to write, to seem serious. And that very quickly fell apart because you can't keep up a pretense like that. I would shoot out a tweet and it just wouldn't make sense in the context of everything I've been doing before because I just shot it out without thinking about it. Or when somebody meets me, we're not actors, none of us. And even if you're not in events, on social media, what I've found is that you can make a connection. It's surprising how close a connection you can make on social media when you're in the same industry with the same tastes and the same aims and the same outlook on life. Social media is actually much more powerful than I'd initially given it credit for. And in terms of time frames, and I think that's important as well, is I've consciously been making an effort to network for a year.
Yeah.
And now I get a mention or a link every week, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. I mean, the example you were showing of yours earlier on, because I'm constantly out there. But it takes quite a long time to get it going. Rand Fishkin was talking about flywheels.
Yeah.
Once you get the flywheel going, you're fine. You don't have to make so much effort. But for that first year, I've made phenomenal amounts of effort, loads of networking, and I get the feeling the flywheel is starting to turn.
Yeah, I think obviously what people are maybe not or don't take into consideration with guys like yourself, for example, who have done this recently, and I include myself in that as well. It's a lot of time, preparation, and cost that goes into that as well. It's not something that we can just waltz up to a stage and get all these brand mentions. You've got your travel time, you've got the costs of getting there, you've got the time to make a nice presentation, the time to buy a guy a beer to smooze him, or whatever your strategy may be. And saying that, I don't think you've ever bought me a beer, Jason. Nah, I'm
no.
on.
I actually don't think I have. No,
that's because we're always at events where there's free booze. So yeah, but no, I think.
But, on social media, there was a podcast episode. I can't remember the name of the lady off the top of my head. She was with. She was talking about how to develop a relationship with somebody on social media, and she was saying, watch what they say, watch what they do, watch what animated GIFs they use, watch the way they interact. And she didn't say be like them, but she said use the parts of yourself that correspond to that person.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly powerful. It's also being selective and not saying something will offend somebody. I've just realized it's personal relationships, it's human relationships, it's being nice to people and being empathetic. Go ahead.
Yeah, so anyway, we'll stop talking about that because that's one little thing. I'm sure to hell with you guys. We've got a few questions that have rolled in here. The first one I'm going to go with is from Angie, who's saying, any idea on LinkedIn mentions? Obviously, no platform is capturing them yet, but they do influence the search engines, right? Obviously, my take on that, Angie, is LinkedIn mentions may or may not affect the search engines. It's what you do with those mentions to then follow up and get your links on websites or whatever it may be, and building a relationship with that person is where the benefit lies, rather than getting someone to tag you in a LinkedIn post or whatever. I'm not sure how much benefit that would actually have. But what's your thoughts on that, Jason?
Well, in fact, I bumped into the top people from LinkedIn at SMX London, and Brad Geddes and myself were asking them that question. Mm-hmm. And I had kind of assumed that Google was crawling it, no problem. But in fact, Brad was saying in America, it can't even crawl the first page at the moment, whereas 6 months ago it could crawl one page. And in Europe, it can crawl one page, but can't go beyond that. So it can see what you're saying, what's currently going on, who you're currently linking to in the very recent past, and who's been commenting, who's been recommending you, but it can't go further. So accumulate all these individual pages and build the image up of itself, but it can't actually crawl LinkedIn natively, whereas Twitter, it can. So if I were to recommend a platform to build relationships to show to Google, I would say Twitter.
Yeah, I tend to agree that. I think obviously with LinkedIn, being, you have to be friends with someone to be able to see the profile with the security and everything, the whole setup they've got there, it would be pretty much impossible to implement something like that. But keep an eye on your LinkedIn notifications, and if someone mentions you, tags you, or whatever, try and do something about that. But I think, as Jason says, work on Twitter. I think it's the best one that's there.
And whereas LinkedIn, because it's a professional network, that's somewhere you're more likely to build up a relationship with somebody who will end up mentioning you in a public post or give you a link in a public post, where you can build up that relationship, where you might be able to collaborate with them on an article, which is a really interesting possibility as well. So I would say promote yourself to Google through Twitter, promote possible opportunities through LinkedIn.
Cool. And the next question, which kind of follows on from what we've just discussed, is from Hydrochem Systems. Do you know if Google can see private Facebook groups on Facebook? Our brand, the guy's saying, our brand is mentioned very often, but there are private industry-based groups. So,
well, as far as I'm aware, they can't. But I mean, even if they can, I mean, the thing about private groups is you can't get in without being invited. And it's the same thing with LinkedIn. Google can't crawl if it hasn't got that access. And if it hasn't been invited, it can't be in there. So my assumption is no, not at all. But the other thing that's important to know, I read it a couple of years ago, so it might not still be true. Google is incapable of crawling more than 30% of Facebook. You have to remember the phenomenal amount of content that comes out of Facebook. The figure was 30%. It might be less, probably less now. It's probably 20%. So every time you post on Facebook, it's going to promote you on Facebook, and it is, let's say, a 1 in 5 chance it's actually going to have any impact at all on Google, that Google is even going to see it, let alone take any notice of it.
I think, obviously, if people are looking at that, LinkedIn and Facebook groups and stuff, they're probably looking at it from their own perspective. The reason you use Facebook is to drive traffic to your website. So if you were in a private Facebook group and people are mentioning, you try and drive them to your website. But, I don't think Facebook private groups or LinkedIn is something that any SEO really does any kind of link reclamation from or whatever. Obviously Twitter is very public, and obviously web mentions and stuff like that. And obviously there's always got to be some kind of goal. People are not tracking their mentions, for the sheer hell of it. They're looking to create a sale, create an opportunity, create a collaboration, or get a link, whatever it may be. And I think, there's enough out there in terms of web mentions, which are going to outstrip most other mentions anyway, on top of Twitter and whatnot. So plenty of opportunity there before you start, worrying too much about private Facebook groups. I would see them as a bonus, if I'm being honest. But each to their own. We have another question.
Sorry, just to conclude that thing, is social media is about people. If you remember that, that's what you're aiming for. Anything else, as you rightly said, is a bonus. Remember, you're talking to people, and this is networking. It's like going down the pub and buying Craig a beer.
I'll do anything for a beer. So we've got another question from Lisa Graves, who I know very well. So Lisa's kind of new to the whole link building side of things. So she's asking a question. When you say reach out after seeing a mention to request that they give a link, what's in it for them? What's the benefit to them?
For linking through to me?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like if I come back to my example, a year ago, somebody linking to me was completely pointless because I had no expertise, I had no authority, and I had no trust within this industry, or very little. The more that I build it up, the more that people linking through to me associates them with me. I'll give you a quick example. I mean, if you look in Google's knowledge graph, and if you don't know what the knowledge graph is, it's basically Google's understanding of the world, of the entities, the named entities like myself and like Craig and like SEMrush, and search metrics. And if you look in the knowledge graph API and you look up search metrics, my name comes up. I've piggybacked on search metrics by associating myself with them so closely. I've done the same with SEMrush. If you look up SEMrush on the Google API, knowledge graph API, my name comes up. So that idea of saying linking through to me now has a value because you're indirectly associating yourself with SEMrush. It's barnacling, it's piggybacking.
Yeah. But I think from Lisa's point of view, and I know because I spend a lot of time talking to her, she'll be asking, say, for example, Milos links to me, and Milos mentions me on an article. What's the benefit of him linking to me? Can you explain that to Lisa? Like, why would Milos ever want to? So if I go to him and say, Milos, you mentioned it there, but do you fancy linking to me? What's the benefit to Milos?
Okay, well, if you're an expert on a specific point, or an expert, let's say on SEO or link building, Milos says, blah, 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 here's some information about link building. This is my really nice way. And by the way, Craig Campbell agrees when they link through to Craig Campbell. You're implying that you're associated with Craig Campbell. Now, if Craig Campbell then mentions Milos back, that's even better. But the value of linking through to somebody to prove a point, linking through to somebody who's an expert, who's authoritative and is trusted in that field, like you are with link building or SEO, indicates that you are saying something that is true. And if Google believes Craig Campbell, and you say the same thing as Craig Campbell and you're linking through to him, by association, it will then believe you.
And also, just to get the point across, Lisa, as well, so I'm going to cut away the whole thing that Jason's talking about because it's all present and correct, but there is no real benefit to Milos from linking to me. That it's not going to it will from that point of view. The benefits for me, I want him to link to me because of the link building power and the kind of stuff, more votes for me, essentially, in layman's terms. So I want Milos to link to me, and I would be asking for a favour or a goodwill gesture, or whatever. I get what Jason's saying, linking out and being trusted with certain people and stuff, but you have to somehow convince Milos to link to me, because it's going to benefit me at the end of the day more. And it could, and it's also going to have a benefit to Milos in some way, because he can see I'm associated with this guy and everything else that Jason said.
But if we take that to the back scratching, and I see in my presentation I was mentioning back scratching. I mean, Milos would link to you in the hope that you would then mention him and link back to him at a future date on something useful. So it really is. I mean, it's like in human relationships. You do stuff for people because you want to do it, because you like them, but also because at some point there is this idea of what comes around, goes around, comes around.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I know Milos, and I've already got a link in his website and stuff. But if I was to ask Milos for a link in his website, I know for a fact in a couple of weeks' time, he'll come to me saying, "I've got this client, and I would like a link in your website. Here's a nice article. Do you mind publishing it?" And that's obviously going to benefit his client. And that's, as Jason says, the back scratching thing that goes on. You help me, I help you. One way or another, indirectly, I might not need to directly link back to Milos. It may be for a client, a friend of a friend, whatever it may be. And that's then going to be beneficial to Milos, because he's got a paying client who's going to benefit from a link from, my website or whatever it may be. So that's just the kind of game. It's like, I'll do this, I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back another time, as Jason says. Back scratching is the perfect word for it.
Yeah, and to come back to the idea of linking out, it's actually corroboration. I probably explained it quite badly, but the position 0, the featured snippet, has a very high ratio of outbound links, pages that appear in the featured snippet. And that indicates that Google is saying this page is linking out to resources that prove what it's saying, or support what it's saying, or corroborate what it's saying, and it's therefore more believable. And the example is Wikipedia. Obviously, that it pretty easily gets those. But Wikipedia, at the bottom of each page, you've got all those references.
Yeah.
And Wikipedia is saying, if you want something to be on Wikipedia, you have to corroborate it with outbound links to sources that are trustworthy and prove what you're saying. And I think that's a very, very good policy as of today. Yeah.
100% agreed. Sadly, Jason, though, we are out of time. We're actually 50 minutes over time. You can talk about Britain. That's the thing with Jason. You talk to him, and before you know it, it's the middle of the night, especially when we're out at events having a beer. But thanks again for coming on. It's been a pleasure doing another webinar with you.
Brilliant.
So I appreciate you coming on, and thank you everyone who watched and anyone who has asked any questions. Do feel free to check out Jason's podcast. And we will be back again in a couple of weeks' time with episode number 16 of the SEMrush Toolbox. So thanks again, everyone. And thanks again, Jason. It's been a pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you, Craig.
Cheers, guys. See you later on.
Have fun. Bye-bye.